the night before, he actually stood his man, right? He stood his ground. He stood his man. I'm sorry, that's something you would say in German. I just now realized that sentence doesn't really make quite much sense in English, but yeah, never mind.
Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I, and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. Before we get started, I'd love to introduce you to some wonderful friends in our hanza who've become patrons of the show. Meet Charlotte from Vengerberg Glamorai, Brett from Oxenfurt, the lovely host of Whispers of Oxenfurt, a short-form Witcher podcast, Tommy Vicavaro, who's not a Nilfgaardian, Maren the Gwent Addict, Ofek Alt, Reza of Kovier, and Christina Maria Vengerberg. Shout out to Jamie of Thornton and Hansa member Red Kite, who pledged and upgraded their pledges since the last episode, as well as Bruno Arcelino, who also upgraded his pledge. Finally, we have 5 members of our hanza who've become the first producer-level patrons of the show. Meet Wrangle, Gary Watts, who favors Time of Contempt, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry, and Eric's the Godling. As producer-level patrons, they receive an introduction shout-out, a spot on the website, monthly bonus content, stickers, a t-shirt, an exclusive producer gift, and producer credits in each and every episode. If you'd like to explore becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. If becoming a patron through Patreon isn't right for you, some of the best ways to support the show are recommending it to others and leaving written reviews. As a creator and host, I value building a community that's kind, fun, passionate, engaged, and very welcoming to everyone. If you know people who would fit the bill and enjoy the show, share Breakfast in Beauclair and invite them to join our growing international hanza. The last way to support the show is by leaving written reviews on Apple Podcasts and Facebook. Now that we're a few episodes in, and you as a listener have a consistent understanding of me as a host and the direction of the show, I trust you all to leave thoughtful and accurate reviews. Reviews help other people who may enjoy the show find it. Search Breakfast in Beauclair on Apple Podcasts or Facebook, smash those review buttons, and leave your thoughts. As for this episode, we're joined by our Polish friend Cyprian, calling in from Berlin to discuss the next short story in Andrzej Sapkowski's The Last Wish, The Lesser Evil. Together, we'll explore themes such as the complex ethics of neutrality, all of the bluffs, improper uses of as you do, and Geralt's famous line about neutrality and the nature of evil. During the mid-episode break, Lars from Witcherflix returns with a crew update and a very intriguing piece of casting news. So, without further ado, let's get to this episode's short story, The Lesser Evil. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'm so excited to have Cyprian here, who's joining us from Berlin, to discuss the next 2 short stories in Andrzej Sapkowski's The Last Wish, The Lesser Evil, and A Question of Price. Hey Cyprian, how's it going?
It's going great.
Yeah?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to get to these 2 short stories, but I'd love to introduce you more to our community a bit. So you're originally from Poland, right? And you've told me that you're currently studying in Berlin?
That's right. My family actually comes from Poland. Yeah, I'm right now living in Berlin and studying history and classical archaeology for those interested.
What drew you to those 2 disciplines?
It's a funny story because I actually was studying economical in computer science before that. Then I realized I'm not that actually good at math. So yeah, I had a little change of mind, you could say. I chose to go after that, what I'm really good at, you know. So history has always been a passion of mine. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, why not just do it? And it turned out quite well.
Yeah. So you and I actually met through Instagram. You've been following the GoodMorhen account, which is so cool. So we've gotten to know each other through there. But could you tell us a little bit about your experience with and your interest in the Witcher universe?
I think one thing to say is I'm Polish. So people don't realize how popular this is in Poland. This is actually like, of course, a medieval fantasy story, but even my 60-year-old father knows about it. The other day we were talking, I noticed you didn't know about the story where the Polish Prime Minister gave a copy of The Witcher 2 to Barack Obama on his visit to Poland.
Yeah.
Like, this is the level of obsession that Poland has with The Witcher, you know?
I love it. You actually told me that anecdote about Barack Obama when we first had a initial screening, and I think in my head I'd love to imagine Barack Obama just reading The Witcher with Michelle and their dog.
That would be pretty crazy.
I think that'd be so cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he was quite impressed actually with the gift. It was unconventional to say the least.
Yeah.
But oh well.
I love it though.
Another fact, like when Witcher 2 was coming out, actually on the Polish version of the Playboy magazine, the cover girl was Tris Marigold.
Oh, that's right. I did hear about that. That's so funny.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's incredible to see like how iconic it is.
It's really crazy, and I think a part of it is like really the lore, because it's based on Polish folklore that really gets people captured, because there isn't that much content regarding Slavic mythology and Slavic folklore out there. It's always like Celtic or like English medieval or something, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but if you have something which you can culturally relate to, it's something else.
Yeah. So today we're going to be discussing Bluffs or Evil, which is the third short story in The Last Wish. And when I first asked you to discuss The Lesser Evil with me, you mentioned that it was one of your favorite stories.
Yes.
So without any spoilers, could you tell us why?
I think it's one of those stories where, how can I describe it? I mean, without spoilers, it's quite challenging. Broadly speaking, like, the situation Geralt finds himself in, there are no good options. I mean, you can only imagine yourself in a similar situation. It's quite mind-boggling, like the circumstances he finds himself in and what ultimately comes of it. We will find out in this episode. So I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Well, thanks so much. And I guess we can, get straight into it, yeah?
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. Part 1 starts with Geralt entering Blaviken with a Kikimora corpse from the nearby swamps and presents it to the local alderman, Caldman, who he knows, hoping for a reward. There is no reward, but a town guard suggests bringing it to Master Irian, the local sorcerer. Part 2, Geralt and the alderman, Caldman, bring the Kikimora to Master Irian's tower, where the sorcerer declines the monster's corpse, but ushers Geralt into the tower alone. Inside the tower, Geralt is surprised to find Stregobor, a sorcerer acquaintance from Kovir who has adopted the pseudonym Master Irian while living in Blaviken. Stregobor reveals he's on the run from Renfri, an exiled princess of Creighton, who's allegedly a cursed and violent mutant, and pleads with Geralt to kill her. Geralt refuses, saying it's neither his job nor his business to kill humans.
Well, first of all, we know he's not from the school of the cat, right? Because otherwise he would just jump right into this contract.
No, that's actually a really excellent point. If he had been from a different Witcher school, this might not have been a moral dilemma that would have come up.
That story would have been quickly over in like 5 more pages and we're done.
That's it.
That's it.
I don't know why Sapkowski wasted his time giving us a very in-depth moral dilemma.
I know, right? Bad guys killed. Job well done. Let's go home.
So I obviously ran through that really fast in the summary, but this is an incredible section when Geralt goes into this tower and talks to the sorcerer there, as the summary said, is living under the name Master Irian, but is really the sorcerer Stregobor. When Sapkowski starts describing the setting that Geralt finds himself in, everything is an illusion. Everything from the ground he's standing on to the environment that he's in to like specifically a naked woman that's in the illusion.
AKA a sex slave.
Apparently, yeah.
I guess so, but she's just an illusion, so
yeah.
I guess it's all right. I don't know.
That's another moral dilemma that we could talk about.
Up for discussion. Let's leave it at that.
So the crux of this story is really Geralt talking to Stregobor the sorcerer about the thing that he's running from. Stregobor is really private about what this thing is.
Yeah.
And it takes a while for Geralt to really get it out of him.
Kinda doesn't want to admit he kinda created this monster himself.
Yeah, we could definitely, take a moment to introduce what the actual details of Stregobor's story are here.
Yeah.
So Stregobor, he actually starts telling Geralt about what's going on. He asks Geralt if he's heard of the Curse of the Black Sun. So TLDR, what that means is there was some sort of eclipse, and there was a sorcerer that said there's a bunch of girls that were born right around the time of the eclipse that are just batshit crazy and violent, and they're going to predict the coming of the end of man.
Just the usual.
Yeah, the usual, like as all women do. As all women are born to do, they bring about the end of man.
So, what's the Curse of the Black Sun? The explanation is quite poor, right? I mean, basically it boils down to this dude said there's a eclipse and all these girls who were born during that eclipse are bad because I said so.
Geralt, he accuses Stregobor and the other sorcerers of essentially taking advantage of the situation and the rumor of this curse in order to break up political alliances, to ruin marriages, in order to like mess up dynasties within the continent. Stregobor was like, no, there's like biological proof that these girls were not only messed up mentally and violent, they did autopsies on the girls that they killed. He said that they like vivisectioned one, and there was like all sorts of messed up things with their hearts, their organs, and things like that. Stregobor and Geralt argue about this back and forth, with neither of them really being able to convince the other of whatever truth that they're trying to convey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a poor argument to make against Geralt in particular, to say, like, because you're a mutant, you're bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it wasn't the best game plan to tell that to a mutant. So, I mean, that hit quite heavy after you read it, because, sure, the Witcher world is a quite grim one, and there's people dying left and right. Let's be real here. But, quite frankly, Geralt puts on the pressure and gets that information out of him, what they have done with these kids, right? They held them in towers, killed them. I don't know. Maybe you could argue really well that he's at fault. If you go ahead and let's just believe what Stregobor says here, right? Like, these kids are like somehow doomed. They're hyper aggressive. They are like whatever. They're just cursed, right? They just bring about evil for whatever reason, right? If you take that for granted, if you believe him, you kind of can get along with the decisions they made, right? To just eradicate these mutants, because like no longer humans in their eyes, right? So they just eradicate them and just finish it before it even started, right? Not to mention that they didn't get all of them, right? Quite a few of them escaped and everything. But then again, it's, as you mentioned, quite dubious with all these political things in between. I mean, it was quite convenient for them that this curse just happened right then and there, right? And also predominantly to girls of higher standing, like nobility, right? So it's kind of hard to believe, right? I mean, they have a motive to have made all of this up.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have no idea what the right side of history would be when you start making these claims that can't really be proven or answered.
Yeah.
Or that, especially in like a medieval era, there's no way of really recording this in a way that's replicable or proven.
Yeah.
It's all like word of mouth. It's all oral history, really.
Yeah. Without like spoiling anything, I think we're going to go back to this point at the end of the story when Stregobor makes a proposal to Geralt, which is going to be quite interesting. But yeah, I guess what it comes down to is like two sides of the story, right? There's no debating what happened. They did some messed up things. They killed some girls. They tortured some. And now one of them is up for revenge, right?
Yep, and that actually is a perfect segue into the details of Stregobor's story. Stregobor starts spinning Geralt this story. He had been summoned to Creighton by the Prince of Creighton's wife, Aridea, and she apparently used a magic mirror. This is going to sound a little familiar to everyone that's familiar with any basic fairy tale.
Yeah.
Aridea used a magic mirror, saw that she would one day be killed by her husband's daughter from previous marriage. So she sends the little girl out with a trapper for the trapper to kill her. The little girl kills the trapper and runs away. They don't find the girl until she turns up a couple years later, having lived with 7 gnomes in Mahakam, where they were robbing merchants on the road. And then there are all these assassination attempts back and forth between Aridea and the princess, Renfri. Eventually, Aridea dies. So Stregobor, after Aridea's death, ends up in Creighton, and he runs into this princess, Renfri, and she recognizes him. Since then, he's been on the run from her, and she has now found him again in Blaviken.
Yeah, and now the stage is set.
And now the stage is set. But it's really interesting to see classic fairy tales,
yeah,
like Snow White, as well as all of the other ones we'll see throughout the short stories.
Yeah. I quite like these comparisons because, I mean, fairy tales, they are nice stories, right? But then you have these twisted versions of these stories, which might be interpreted as this is what actually happened, right? The world is messed up and this is what happened. This one princess was living with the 7 gnomes and word of mouth gets around and everyone changes the story a bit. Yeah, now we have a whole story. That actually happened quite a lot also in our world, just like these small little bits, but everyone who's familiar with these tales will notice them.
Yeah, it definitely gets a little more explicit. This comes up much later in the story, but Renfri mentions that they tried to poison her with an apple.
Yeah.
And so that's like another funny little detail. But there's a lot of parallels between the Lesser Evil and Snow White.
Yeah.
We get one of the most iconic quotes in the whole series. This is a quote that a lot of people reference and love, and I definitely think it's worth reading out.
Do the honors.
Geralt, says Stregobor, when we were listening to Eltabod, many of us had doubts, but we decided to accept the lesser evil. Now I ask you to make a similar choice. Evil is evil, Stregobor, said the Witcher seriously as he got up. Lesser, greater, middling, it's all the same. Proportions are negotiated, boundaries blurred. I'm not a pious hermit, I haven't done only good in my life, but if I'm to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer not to choose at all. Iconic.
So much so that it actually ended up with one of the trailers for the 3rd game, right?
Yeah, this is definitely a quote to remember, and this sets up the entire story from here on out. I think this is a perfect example of the value that Geralt has that is attacked repeatedly throughout the story. He makes it very clear here to Stregobor, and he will throughout, that one, he doesn't believe in a lesser evil, and he refuses to be broken into choosing one.
Right.
So remember this.
We're gonna have to, yeah.
Listeners, remember this for a hot second, and we will definitely get back to it.
Take notes, people. This is important right here.
This is some important shit, so you better listen up.
All right, I forgot. This podcast is R-rated. We can swear in here.
Oh, yeah, by all means. I'm from New York. I'm going to swear.
I see. All right, then. But in all seriousness, I mean, yeah, as you said, sets like the moral standard of Geralt, right? This is the standard he wants to live up to. We're gonna see how that one works out for him, but it's crazy. I mean, not a lot of people gonna think that's a hard choice to make, right? Sacrifice one life to save 10 others. But Geralt says, no, it doesn't matter to him. He doesn't really care if he's gonna have to kill 10 people or one. Like, he's killing it. That's the point, right? It's evil one way or another, and he doesn't want to do any of it. So it's really interesting how a person with this mindset, which this quote captures perfectly, what happens to Geralt when he gets to a situation where he's gonna have to choose. I'm sorry, I'm spoiling right now.
Part 3 takes us to the Golden Court Inn, where Caldman and Geralt question the innkeeper, asking after Renfri and her gang. He says the gang is there for tomorrow's market, and they are staying in the inn. Geralt confronts them alone, asking for Renfri, and they taunt and insult the Witcher. Right before a fight breaks out among the men, Renfri arrives. She speaks to Geralt and Caldman, presenting them with a letter of safe conduct from a local king, effectively allowing her to operate above the law within Blaviken. After the alderman leaves, Renfri tells Geralt that Stregobor will die tomorrow, and that, quote, it would be the lesser evil if he died alone.
It's quite a chunk to dissect.
Yeah, it's a really big chunk of the story for sure. In this scene where Geralt actually confronts the gang, except for one very specific moment, he is incredibly calm throughout this whole interaction, which is wild.
Yeah.
What I love about this also is how detailed Sapkowski gets with these minor characters that we're never really going to see after the short story, but they're so vivid, and I love that about the way that he writes.
You know what? I love and I hate it at the same time.
Why is that?
Because he paints like such an interesting picture. Like, I want to know more about these people. Like, what were their lives before like this interaction in the inn? You know, what were they doing? I think their life story is one hell of a story. Every single one of them. But you never get to see them again. You just pass people by and everyone has a story to tell. Everyone is fighting a battle you don't know about. It's quite interesting. And I like to compare it with Star Wars, actually. The original ones, this iconic one, right? With Luke and Obi-Wan. Where they come to this canteen with all these different aliens. And every one of these characters in this canteen has like a 10-page long wiki page with all this backstory. And I would love something like that in The Witcher, not only for characters but also for like kingdoms and everything. It's very detailed in the story, right? In the context of the story, but again, I want to know more. Yeah, it speaks volumes about his quality as a writer, but sometimes it just drives me crazy.
I feel like it's one of those things that it's definitely a good thing to be upset by.
I guess so, yeah.
Renfri's gang consists of 6 men. Vera and Namir, who are twins. Nohorn, who's only described disfigured by a scar. Tavik, who wears a plate. Cyril, who's a half-elf, who does a lot of the dirty talk. Or, not dirty talk, insulting talk. Dirty talk is very different. Yeah. And 15, who is just half-naked the whole scene.
Yeah, and drunk, I think, right?
Probably all of them are. Cannot relate. They all probably are drunk.
But you gotta have to be. I mean, like, to talk some serious shit to a witcher like that, they are quite confident.
Oh, yeah. There's this excerpt that I like here also. The half-elf Cyril is going back and forth with Geralt. This is the one moment where Geralt breaks slightly. Geralt says something about Cyril's mother. Cyril says back, "At least I knew my mother."
Ooh.
Oh, snap. This isn't quite World Star yet, but we're going to get there. Yeah. This is another little detail that we get about the history of Witchers, where we hear a little bit in The Witcher about the origin of Witchers, a little more in A Grain of Truth through his conversation with Nivellen, and then again, like another little nugget. And then there's like a stupid little line here. I love the dialogue that Sapkowski writes. Nohorn, who's one of the idiots in Renfri's gang, says, "What did he say about Cyril's mother? Something extremely nasty as I understood it, that she was an easy lay or something. Hey, 15, is it right to listen to some straggler insulting a companion's mother? A mother, you son of a bitch, is sacred." And I love that line. I think it's so funny.
That's actually funny. If I remember correctly, it's actually different in Polish.
Is it?
I think so. I don't remember him calling him a son of a bitch, actually.
Ooh, what is it?
Wait, okay, I'm gonna have to search for a while, but you just keep going. I'm gonna come back to it.
Okay, sounds good. Right when they're about to fight, Renfri arrives. As she's trying to figure out what's going on, Cyril steps in and some of the boys start stepping in. She tells Cyril to shut up. The line in the text says, "Cyril stopped laughing immediately." Geralt wasn't surprised. There was something very strange in Renfri's voice. Something associated with the red reflection of fire on blade, the wailing of people being murdered, the whinnying of horses, and the smell of blood, which is fucking terrifying. I wonder what a voice like that would sound like. Something that, I guess, reaches into the pit of your soul and just, like, pulls it out cold.
Right.
And I'm really interested to see how they adapt the story on screen and where the actress who was recently recast to play Renfri is going to take the character.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna have to be like a death stare, but in voice form, I guess. It's quite hard to imagine. I mean, you have such a description of a voice, like, I'm not a big actor myself, but trying to imitate something like this, something so much so described, well, maybe she's gonna surprise us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see a character like this on screen, and I think that we see very few of them. Characters like this that are female and brutal and I think complex in their brutality. I'm really, really excited to see how this plays out in the Netflix series for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I love about The Witcher as a whole, you know, like Nifellen, for example, right? He has a backstory too, right? If you just look at him, he's a bear or whatever, right? But he has a whole story behind himself, and so does Renfri. No one is evil just for the sake of it, or at least not a lot of people. I mean, sure, there are some psychos out there, but you know, that's funny. I read a quote the other day, right? It was, everyone is a hero in their own story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is pretty much spot on for this story. Everyone in this story, every major character thinks they're the hero in their story, and they think it's justified what they are doing.
Yeah, that's a really incredible point to make. And I think that's actually a perfect segue into part 4. So we've heard Stregobor's side of the story. We get a small taste of Renfri and her gang. Part 4 takes us to Geralt's room in Caldemann's house. Geralt returns to his room after dinner and finds Renfri waiting for him. She pours them both a drink and says that there are only 2 people who can prevent the upcoming slaughter. Stregobor if he surrenders himself to her voluntarily, and Geralt if he kills Stregobor himself. Geralt notes that Stregobor would never surrender. Renfri here cites the Tridem Ultimatum and says that she plans to present it to the sorcerer to force his hand, but she doesn't tell Geralt what the Tridem Ultimatum is. Geralt refuses to kill Stregobor on her behalf, but tells Renfri that he also refused Stregobor's pleas to kill her. The Witcher vows he won't allow anyone to be slaughtered in Blaviken and recommends Renfri leave the town in peace. After a brief trance, Renfri tells Geralt that she'll leave Blaviken in the morning for good, and then the 2 of them spend the night together.
As you do.
I don't know if "as you do" would be an appropriate thing to say here. Let's be real.
I mean, all right. we're talking about Geralt here, right? You know, witches have a higher libido, and that's a fact. I'm not making this up. But Renfri is quite handsome herself.
Geralt does bring that up to someone, and he asks, like, she must not be that bad then, eh?
Yeah,
and the person's like...
To each their own, right? Eskel likes horned women, so that's fine too, you know? Whatever someone does in their bedroom, that's none of my business, you know? It's the classic rivals before the showdown, right? They are talking about it and everything. Since she's a girl and he's a male, they sleep together.
So we see in this scene Renfri on her own presenting us with her humanity and with her vulnerability, which, you know, we wouldn't necessarily see in any other story. Again, like digs back to the complexity of these characters and the way that they're written. We get a very complete picture of not only who they are, but who they think they are and who others think they are, which I find incredibly fascinating.
Yes.
So there's a really wonderful excerpt here where Geralt asks Renfri if she knows why she was hunted in the past. She admits she knows she's supposed to be cursed or that she's supposed to be a monster because of this black sun thing. Geralt asks if she is a monster. And there's this moment of humanization and vulnerability from Renfri. She just tells him, I don't know. Because how am I to know? Like when I cut my finger, I bleed every month, and I get hangover when I get drunk. That's her idea of normal. Her world has always been her world. And without, I think, the external point of view of others, she would have continued operating in the way that she knows how. And it's not until her values and her way of living starts clashing with societal values or individual values that it really starts making it known that she comes into conflict with people.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if one guy tells you you're crazy, maybe he's wrong, right? But if 1,000 people tell you you're crazy, maybe you're wrong, right? I mean, but it's quite interesting, the point you hit on. That's all she knows. She even told Geralt, like, in her past, when she was a child, she had everything, right? She had a nice life, she had a stable home. Everyone treated her like everything was fine, right? But then after this whole curse, everything has gone to shit, right? And now she's apparently a monster and everyone wants to kill her. You can only imagine, like, how much emotional stress this puts on somebody, right? Like, everything you know is being taken away from you. People treat you as a threat and paint you out as a monster, and you don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
No wonder she feels like an outcast. Eventually, she lashes out because of her vulnerability. She lashes out in anger, and this goes up in magnitude and ends in what is about to happen. Again, she's not evil, like, just for the sake of being evil.
Yeah.
She has her reasons, as does everyone, for everything they do.
Yeah.
No one does anything without the reason, and even the most evil people. I bet even in our world, like monsters, dictators, in their minds at least, thought they were in the right. They were doing the right thing. Of course, we don't know what was going on in their heads, but that's kind of the message here, right? To come back to it. Everyone is a hero in their own story. It's quite an interesting take.
I also think it's one of those things where she was a princess who was then brought to be murdered, and she escaped. She talks a lot about what she needed to do to survive. And I feel like it's one of those things where you don't notice the change in yourself day by day by day. But then when you look back a number of years later, suddenly you're so far from the person who you were. And I think it's, again, like one of those things where you hear stories of the arcs that people have, like what they're notorious for in the landscape and the Witcher universe. But for her, she only did what she needed to survive until it got her to this point. When you look at it in retrospect, it's almost like yeah, of course, that's where I came from because this is where I am now. But for an outsider who has no context into her story and who she is, it's unsurprising that she's seen as violent, as something to be feared.
Yeah, of course. And it makes you wonder, like, what we can take away from this is, like, to pay more attention to our surroundings, right? Maybe this asshole who just cut you off in traffic, maybe he just had a really bad day. You don't know what's going on in people's heads, like what they're doing, what they're doing. You see the effects of it and you just pass by each other. Sure, he just cut you for traffic and that was an asshole move, of course, but you don't know his reasoning for it. Most of the time it's going to be because he's late to work or something, right? Something avoidable, easy, but you never know. Maybe he's rushing his pregnant wife to the hospital because she's going to give birth and he's going to have to hurry.
Yeah.
We just all, I think, can take a step back and just look at everything from a broader perspective. Sometimes we all just get so focused on our own perspective and start judging people, right, for the actions when we don't even know what drives them to do such a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're now at the point of the story where Geralt has come to the town, heard Stregobor's side of the story, heard Renfri's side of the story, and he's sitting on a decision. So we're going to take a quick break on this cliffhanger. When we return, Cyprian and I will continue our discussion of the lesser evil.
Hey, it's Lars from Witcherflix, and this is Tidings from Toussaint. The news drought continues, but let's stay positive, everyone. This can only mean the post-production is hard at work at the moment and busy like bees, creating the first big trailer, a few new character promo pictures, or even the final show. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Anyway, I can still report about a few tiny but interesting pieces of news. Thanks to Redanian intelligence, we know that landscape artist Howard Weaver was recruited for the Witcher show. He is in charge for the backdrops of the show. His previous work includes highly acclaimed franchises like Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Batman, or Die Hard. It seems like Howard Weaver already created backdrops for screens that are set on places like Brokilon Forest or Vizima, the capital of Temeria. According to Spotlight CV, British actor Benjamin Cheffin will play a Doppler Kahir on the show. The real Kahir will be played by Eamon Farron. A Doppler, by the way, is a shapeshifter who can transform into anyone he likes if he has a similar body weight. This is quite interesting, as a Doppler isn't involved in Kahir's stories. Benjamin Cheffin is supposed to appear in episode 5 and 6, which almost certainly adapts The Last Wish and The Bounds of Reason. All of this is so mysterious, as it raises so many questions. Why doesn't Eamon Farron play a Doppler version of himself? How does a Doppler fit into the two short stories? Is this Doppler actually named Dudu? What makes it even more curious is that Benjamin Cheffin deleted this entry again from his Spotlight CV. Well, we still have to wait and have to be patient for any more answers. Moreover, Redanian intelligence did some interesting work during the last 2 weeks. They have opened their archives and started a new series presenting footage from behind the scenes of The Witcher show, including some never-before-seen pictures, such as pics of the beautiful armor from Cintra and Fort Monostar in Hungary, where several of the promo pics showing Henry Cavill as Geralt were shot. So, that's it for this episode of Tidings from Toussaint. We talk again in 2 weeks when the next podcast is released. Until then, good luck on the path.
So thank you so much for the update, Lars. Welcome back from the break. I'm here with Cyprian discussing the third short story from Last Wish, The Lesser Evil. So we left off with Geralt having spoken separately to both Stregobor the Sorcerer and Renfri the exiled princess of Creighton and Stregobor's allegedly cursed hunter. Both pleaded for Geralt to kill the other, telling him that killing the other would be, quote, the lesser evil. Part 5 brings us to Caldemon's home, where over breakfast, Caldemon expresses disbelief that Renfri would leave in peace. He gossips to Geralt that some of her men were recognized from the Free Angren Company and from the massacre at Tridem, which Geralt hadn't heard of. Oh shit.
Yeah.
So Caldemon tells Geralt that 3 years ago, bandits hijacked a ferry at Tridem and began slaughtering the people on board one by one until the Baron released their comrades from the dungeons. The Baron faced exile or execution for his actions, some angry he waited so long to give in, others believing he shouldn't have negotiated at all. The Baron argued he chose the lesser evil by releasing the bandits to save the people on the ferry. Geralt suddenly realizes that Renfri has lied to him about leaving Blaviken. By referencing the Tridem Ultimatum, she plans to murder people at the market until Stregobor surrenders. The Witcher tries to get Caldemon to imprison the gang preventively, and the Alderman refuses because of her letter of safe conduct. Geralt insists she has to be stopped now while the marketplace is empty, saying, "We have to take the lesser evil." Caldemon tries to stop Geralt unsuccessfully.
So he stood his ground regarding his morals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he told Renfri to basically fuck off, right? No, I'm not going to kill Stregobor for you, and neither will I kill you for him. You can both just piss off, right? Stop all this nonsense. And this would actually be the best outcome, right? let's just say Renfri had a change of mind and she would just forgive Stregobor, right? And just leave. I think it's quite naive to think that she's just going to leave. I mean, she came here with a purpose and she's not just going to change her mind. Yeah, let's talk about this ultimatum.
Yeah, it's very similar to the trolley problem, or it is the trolley problem. You have one person on one track and 5 people on the other track, and you have to decide what you're going to do. A lot of people think it's a very simple answer. But when you look at who those people might be, when you look at the impact of a decision like that, a lot of people have a hard time choosing. So this is the Witcher universe's version of the trolley problem.
Yeah, I think it even goes deeper than that because there's another layer to it. He gave in to the demands, right, of the gang.
Yes.
One side of the story is like he gave in too late, right? He should have gave in, saved these people. And then another said he shouldn't have given in at all.
Yeah.
Especially not this late. Because now what he has done essentially is he's shown, okay, with hostages you can get what you want. And now he has created the basis for other people to do the same. If he wouldn't have given in, like they would have killed all these people, sure.
Yeah.
But maybe like the logic behind it, I think, is they would have to kill all these people and then what? They don't have any hostages, so they haven't accomplished anything. So people see like you can't be messed with hostages. Pretty much sacrifice these people for the sake of such a hostage crisis not happening again. But then you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to sacrifice any people for that matter or something like this? It's tough, right? I'm glad I'm not the Baron.
Or Geralt, as we'll get to.
Oh, yeah.
Rough. Part 6 takes us to Blaviken Market. Caldman has been unsuccessful in preventing Geralt from going to confront Renfri. Geralt enters Blaviken's Market alone, where the gang is already waiting. Renfri's not with them, having gone to Stregobor's tower. After a brief, tense exchange, the gang attacks Geralt. He dispatches them quickly, causing chaos in the public square. Renfri arrives. She tells Geralt that Stregobor won't leave his tower, even if she were to butcher entire towns, making her recreation of the Tridem Ultimatum moot. Surrounded by her dead comrades, she sees that Geralt has made his choice, and now she makes hers. Reluctantly, Geralt fights Renfri, eventually slashing her across the thigh, killing her.
Damn. So there we have it. She's dead. Everyone's dead.
Yeah.
So I think we can safely say like Geralt's moral high ground has gone out of the window. He has taken a choice. Yeah, what you think of it?
There's a really interesting passage when Renfri first confronts Geralt, where she first enters the town square. And she says, "You've made your choice. Are you sure it's the right one?" Geralt says, "This won't be another Tridem." She tells them that it wouldn't have been because Stregobor doesn't really care about anyone, so it wouldn't have worked. Geralt says, "Get out of here." And she says, "No, you made a choice. Now it's my turn." I think it's this really interesting stalemate where every single character in this story, whether it's Caldman or Renfri or Stregobor or Geralt himself, doesn't want to make a move unless it's reactive to something that someone else is about to do.
Right.
They're kind of dancing around the status quo, just waiting for someone to break it before they react to it.
Yeah.
I guess I wonder, like, when is it an individual's responsibility to step up and to be responsible for the community at large? Should Caldman have done something, or was the letter of conduct a very valid thing to hold him back? Is there anything Renfri could have done? Is there anything Stregobor could have done? And then Geralt specifically at the center of this ultimatum between Renfri and Stregobor, should he as an individual have done something sooner?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see. I mean...
So much to unpack.
It is. But that's exciting, right? Okay, so I think Geralt is fucked. I mean, look, I think Geralt should have been more, how do I phrase this in English? I think he should have stood his ground regarding his moral values, because he didn't. He just rushed out and killed the gang. The point of the Elderman, Caldman, the mayor, let's call him the mayor. His point was, okay, sure, it would be a tragedy if all these people die, right? But they haven't done anything yet.
Exactly.
So can we jump into it like that? Especially with them having this letter from the king that basically grants them immunity. And he doesn't want to like get shit from the king, right? Because his head is on the line. So, I mean, you can understand his point. But then on the other hand, especially Renfri, she tells him there are 2 people who can like prevent all this, right? Or choose the lesser evil or whatever. It's Stregobor and Geralt. What I'm thinking to myself is is like, no, it's not Geralt, because it's actually not his responsibility, I think, in my eyes. He essentially has nothing to do with it.
Right.
I mean, he just came to this town. He didn't knew any of this. He just wanted to make some coin and fuck off, right? I mean, it's her revenge crusade, just hunting Stregobor down for God knows how long. It's her revenge. Like, Stregobor, of course, has a problem because he doesn't want to get killed.
Yeah.
Interesting point also, like, he's a mage, but he apparently isn't a battle mage or whatever. Like, he doesn't have great fighting capabilities.
Right.
I mean, if this would be Yennefer or Triss or Fringilla or whoever, right? They would just destroy Renfri, right? It wouldn't even be a fight. Well, what did he say? He's like focused on illusions and weather.
Yeah. Not a very good person to have in your corner during a battle.
yeah, I know, right? So what I think Renfri's doing, she's just like taking her responsibility. She's just putting it on Garrett's shoulders.
Yeah.
It's ultimately her decision. She's driving all of this with her wish for revenge. Again, if she would have just backed out, if she would just walk away, everything would be fine. But she doesn't want to give up on that at all. So actually, she's responsible for all that happens, not Geralt in any way.
Right.
That's my point, I guess.
Yeah, we definitely see like full frontal bad luck Geralt in this whole story. Like, nothing works out for him, the poor guy.
Yeah.
This is now the third short story that we are watching him fight, but the first time we're really seeing him get into it with humans. In The Witcher, who was fighting the Striga, A Grain of Truth, this is with the vampire Verena. And now we're here and we learn that he doesn't fight humans, or at least not unless he's provoked, but he doesn't go on contracts.
Yeah.
It comes down to him being dragged into this thing that he doesn't really have any business in, and then making it his business.
I know, right?
Yeah, for better or for worse. Or for worse. Just for worse. None of this is good.
None of it is good, right? That's exactly the point, you know. And on the other hand, let's go back again. What's the breaking point is actually Geralt. Kind of. All the time he was like, no, it's none of my business. It's your problem, right? I'm not going to choose anything here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to meddle in this. But then when he realizes this ultimatum, he rushes out, even after the mayor tells him not to. He chooses, basically, right?
Right.
And he just abandoned the morals he claimed, right? And he just goes out and confronts them. And sure, he gets fired upon with this crossbow, right? That's it. He gets fired upon and sure kills them.
Yeah.
He chose in his mind the lesser evil, which was killing these people. Now it's an interesting question because his decision was based on this ultimatum that if he isn't gonna step in, there's gonna be a massacre. But then Renfri comes in after all her comrades are killed and pretty much takes his bases away from him, right? She tells him, I just came here to not kill all these people because I talked with Stregobor and this wouldn't have worked. He laughed at me. He wouldn't come out at all.
Right.
So she just actually took his bases away from him. So pretty much makes his choice for nothing. These people wouldn't have died anyway.
And it brings about an interesting aspect of Renfri's character, the specific point that you mentioned. She says, or at least she claims, we don't know if she would or wouldn't, but she claims that she would have just left at that point. So she wouldn't have resorted to violence if it wasn't, in her eyes, necessary, which I think makes her a very interesting character in that she's been vilified this whole time into believing that she's just completely bloodthirsty. And then you see her make this decision, or about to make this decision. She wouldn't have resorted to violence if it wouldn't have gotten an answer from him.
And now is the real question. Do you actually believe her?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't know. That is a really good question.
Yeah, I was waiting to drop that one. So.
Wow, rude. I'm so upset you didn't put it in my notes.
Seriously, I think this is pretty much the breaking point right here. Was this a bluff? Look at this from this perspective. She went out to talk to Stregobor, right? Tell him, like, okay, listen, I have my guys back there. We're going to kill everyone until you come out. And he said, we don't know what he said. So he said something. She's coming back. And what she sees, she walks in there and she sees all of her comrades dead. Geralt standing here with the bloody sword.
Right, so now she has no backup.
Right, what she's gonna do right now, is she gonna like come in here and like, oh hey Geralt, yeah, I just came back to kill all these people. She doesn't have any backup. She sees what he's capable of. He just killed 6 men on his own.
Right.
He's gonna handle her. It's like a game of poker, really. Like she's bluffing right now. She's saying, okay, well, this doesn't work. You can actually go because I didn't want to kill all these people anyway. So she's just trying to maybe diffuse the situation with this bluff. telling him we wouldn't have killed them anyway because it wouldn't have worked. So why are we fighting, right? But this doesn't work because Geralt doesn't back off, and then in the end, neither does she.
Right.
We don't really know, but this is an interesting thing to keep in mind. We don't actually know, and Stregobor, without spoiling again, doesn't answer that question anyway. So
Geralt actually almost stops himself. He's very, very hesitant to fight her.
I know, right?
Because he tells her that, like, if I fight you, this is it. And she accepts her death before they even start. She definitely seems to, really give it her all, but it's not enough. The moment when she dies, she tries to get Geralt to come to her and to, like, hold her. And then when she dies, it turns out she drops a small dagger, so she probably intended on killing him as she was dying.
Yeah.
Ooh, and then so after she dies, we get to, like, the last bit of the chapter where Stregobor arrives. Like, he comes puttering out of his tower wanting to collect Renfri's body for an autopsy. So he witnessed everything from a crystal ball in the safety of his tower, and a bystander threatens to kill Stregobor if he touches the corpse, and Stregobor leaves, announcing he'll leave Blaviken and return to Corvair for good. So a crowd gathers and begins to stone the Witcher, and the scene's interrupted by Caldeman, who stops the crowd's retribution. The alderman confronts Geralt about his actions, asking if this bloodshed is the lesser evil he believed to be necessary. Geralt, uncertain and entirely alone, is banished from Blaviken and told never to come back.
The feeling I got from reading this part in the book was actually, and we come back to this whole bluff thing. This is where it clicked in my mind. Like, hey, maybe this was a bluff, because Stregobor says he saw all this in his crystal ball. I think it's safe to assume that he saw the whole fight with Geralt and the 6 guys as well. And now it would be so obscure to imagine that he saw this happening on the market square while he was negotiating with Renfri, and then he saw Geralt basically like kicking everyone's ass and just Renfri's gang just dying, right?
Yeah.
And he saw like she has no backup. Like, is she gonna kill everyone on her own? No, she's not gonna make that. And then he like laughed at her and said, oh yeah, I'm not gonna come out, blah blah, because he knew that her backup was gone. Like, Geralt pretty much solved his problem, and he could easily like reject her ultimatum or whatever, because she wouldn't have had the means to do it.
Yeah, that's probably a really accurate observation. There is a quote from him. As soon as he kind of paddles into the square, he says, "What slaughter?" Yeah, you're right. He probably did realize what was happening and what Geralt's choice meant for him.
Yeah, looking at just different perspectives from all the people, right? Renfri didn't know that he had like a magic ball, and she didn't know what was happening on the marketplace before she got there, right? I mean, sure, one of her gang members said in the beginning, yeah, Renfri, she told them that he would attack or whatever.
Right.
Also, Stregobor rushes in like, this is all done, like it was all part of a plan. Okay, Geralt, get up, let's get her on the wagon, let's go. Like, she knew everything was going on, and Geralt just was standing there like he couldn't believe what was happening, I guess. And the interesting thing is, like, they don't do the autopsy, right?
No, the villagers don't let Stregobor even touch the body at all. And he just kind of lets the whole thing go because he'd rather leave with his life than risk it even getting an autopsy.
Wait, was it the villagers or was it Geralt who told him no?
It said that a villager or a man that Geralt didn't know pulled out his sword and threatened Stregobor.
Okay, really, because that's actually interesting, because again, I have the Polish version here, and in the Polish version, it kind of implies, at least to my ears, it was Geralt himself, but it was like a different voice. You know what I mean? Like someone else talking through him, right?
Oh, I didn't catch that in English translation.
I'm not sure. I mean, this is just the feeling I got. Geralt kind of being an observer to his actions, his own actions, right? He's just like out of control, and he's just saying, don't touch her and everything. Maybe because he knew her side of the story, right? And knew her reasoning. But anyways, we don't get the autopsy, so we don't get proof. Is she a monster? Is she not?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because I didn't pick that up from the English translation at all. There is a note, and we didn't really talk about this much in the episode, but Stregobor, when he's describing the girls, he mentions that right before their death, they showed the gift of clairvoyance. And when Geralt talks to Renfri alone in his room at Caldeman's, she has a moment where she falls into a predictive trance.
Yeah.
Again, like, I wonder if that might be another note where we see this kind of biological proof where she could be what Stregobor accuses her of being, which is like a monster and a mutant and something cursed. You're right, we like really don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And Geralt is very uncertain if he made the right choice.
Yeah.
And that he kind of sees himself reacting in a way that feels almost out of body.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, you're good with words. That describes it quite well, what I picked up reading this. Like, again, the Polish version. I don't know the English one, but it's crazy, right? I mean, again, I think Stregobor's willingness to do the autopsy, right? He actually even rushes Geralt to do it. Like, hey, let's go. I'll show you, right? He's so sure of it. Speaks volumes about it. He seems convinced that she's a monster. I mean...
Yeah, but we'll never know.
Yeah, I guess so.
And neither will Geralt, really. So I think it's one of those things that we end up sharing with the character where either way, whether he went with Stregobor, whether he went with Renfri, whether he acted or didn't, we'll never know what the quote-unquote right choice was and if he made it.
Yeah, definitely. And you can even argue, like, is there a right choice? If he would have killed Stregobor, maybe that would have worked, maybe it didn't. I mean, I think Renfri said to him, he wouldn't let you in anyway. God knows what would happen if Geralt would just walk away, right? He would just actually leave the city. Like, we don't know what would have happened, especially with this whole bluff thing in mind. If Stregobor didn't see like Geralt killing all these people because he left, maybe he would have turned himself in, like, to the police. No, like to Renfri, you know, handing himself over. Or maybe they would have slaughtered all the people in the village. That's kind of the beauty of this ending, right? We don't know. It's everyone's guess, right?
I mean, even though we don't know what might have been the right or wrong answer and the right or wrong action, we do see very clearly what Geralt's values are, I think, and how they kind of manifest in his world and in his universe. And just as kind of like a little nugget for everyone who hasn't read the books yet, because both Cyprian and I have. This argument on neutrality comes back in the saga like 3-4 books from now, and he has a view on it then. He has a really specific view on neutrality then, which he then imparts to Ciri, but I feel like this is kind of the birthplace of that view, where he has such a strong value, or he believes he does, until it's then challenged.
Right. I think that's a really good point, until it's challenged, because you could kind of argue like he breaks under the pressure. He declared that he wasn't going to do anything. He's not going to meddle in this. And then from Geralt's perspective, he could expect a massacre, right? Yeah. On a big scale. Like, I think it's an easy choice. So again, you can pretty much understand every character's choice in this story. You can understand why they did what they did. If it's good or bad, that's up for discussion. But that's why it's one of my favorite stories and why it's so well written. Yeah. Again, you can understand everyone's motives in here.
Absolutely. I find it really interesting that you, or even any of these characters, you can claim a characteristic about yourself or an aspect of identity or value, but it doesn't really mean anything until it's put up to the test and until you can actually claim right to it. You can say you're courageous, but then if you end up in a situation where you end up being cowardly, it doesn't really mean much, right? Like, so no matter how you view yourself, it's an understanding of like, I think what you've done to earn it. And I think that that's where Geralt's values come in. And he says he's neutral, and his actions up to a point support that. And then it just completely shatters.
Maybe it shatters, but then again, maybe because of his declared neutrality, right? You could argue for the point that he just did it to save the civilians, the quote-unquote neutral people who doesn't have anything to do with it. Like, he didn't kill all of the gang for Stregobor, right? Because he asked him. No, he did it because he thought they were going to kill civilians.
Right.
So maybe he didn't abandon his moral principles.
Yeah.
We're going quite deep in here.
I mean, you can definitely argue that even though his actions of killing people are seemingly from the outside evil, his intention behind them, like you said, can you really define it as bad or as evil, or something to be vilified if it really does come down to an intent to help? Who knows?
Right. But then again, Stregobor said, I think in the end, to the common man standing on this marketplace, Geralt just rushed out and killed everyone, and that's it. Yeah. Right? They don't know any of the background. They don't know anything. They just see a madman coming in and killing everyone, right? I mean, there's so many perspectives to this. I think we could record another episode.
So that's it for our show today. Cyprian, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and thank you to our community for listening. So Cyprian will be back next episode, in which we'll discuss Geralt's first brush with destiny in the short story A Question of Price.
Thanks for joining us at the breakfast table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast in Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa, with the Tidings from Toussaint news segment by Lars from Witcherflix. The show's edited by Alyssa, with the Breakfast in Beauclair theme by Mojo Filter Media, and the Tidings from Toussaint theme by Bettina Campomanes. Breakfast in Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City, with Wrangle, Gary Watts, who favors Time of Contempt, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry, and Eric's the Godling. Special thanks to Cyprian for joining us for this episode, and our international Hanza for their support.